Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled Overworked, so I handed in my notice to my actual boss. A few years ago I got a job with a regulatory compliance company. I had agreed to a consultant's salary and a company car with the person I thought was the director. I handed in my notice, only to then find out they weren't paying me the agreed salary, and the company car was a cheap runaround whereby consultants usually drive high-end cars. I was disappointed, but would have been humiliated to admit this to the company I was in at the time, so I took the job. Turns out the person I'd agreed the terms with was the subcontracted company I would be working with. I worked directly with the subcontractor company, while being paid via the other. For the next 4 months I was worked harder than I have ever been in my whole life. On top of this, I was being paid terribly in comparison to a person in a similar position. Due to the subcontractor company not understanding what a health and safety policy was, around 30 to 40 generic documents, I had to write an entire management system, literally what it sounds like, in a single weekend. I got around 3 hours sleep a night, but completed it by 7 p.m. on the following Monday. The company then complained that they should have had it at 4 p.m., when no deadline was given. I sustained damage to my right eye due to eye strain in this time that hasn't healed to this day. They then required me to do a professional qualification that usually takes 6 months, in 1 month, around my current workload, which they were upping in preparation for me becoming qualified. This was the final straw. I handed in my notice to the head company without any warning or discussion on the matter. I sent the subcontractor company a message stating that I'd handed in my notice with no further explanation. You can imagine the fallout. They were stuck handling several huge contracts by themselves overnight, with even more coming the following month. They had to pass on a lot of the contracts, and 6 months of work to set up an external employment scheme went down the drain. The director of the main company didn't really understand what was going on, but he let me complete my notice period doing filing, as I'd solved several long-standing issues, including getting rid of an outside consulting service that was costing them thousands annually. I got a job at 1.5 times my salary within a few weeks of quitting. I was working so hard when I went to the new employer, I cleared 6 months worth of outstanding files within 1 month, ironically, and my manager has thought highly of me since. I've had 4 internal promotions since then in the space of a few years. Next one is titled, My landlord refused to do repairs, so I reported her, and now she's bankrupt. Should have just done the repairs, Karen. So here's the story of my previous living situation, which was at best horrendous. I moved into what I thought at the time was a lovely 3/4 bedroom house with a nice offset garage and garden, perfect for my family consisting of myself, my partner and my 3 kids. Well, a few weeks into moving in, the problems started to arise. We moved in just before Christmas and the weather was awful, torrential rain in fact, which is when we discovered the horrendous leak in my roof. I mean water teeming through the roof, into the walls, and down my windows, resulting in all my pots and pans having to sit in my window to collect said rain. We then ended up realizing we had a leak through the roof in my daughter's room after she was awoken by rain dripping on her whilst she slept. She was 2 at the time. We discovered over the course of the time we lived there that the electrics had never been checked and often shorted out. The gas pipes were under regulated minimum gauge, and when the heating was on we couldn't power the gas cooker or vice versa. The decking out the back was rotten and when stood on it just snapped. There was a 4 feet drop underneath this. A gas safety check showed that the combi boiler was broken and condemned, but they still refused to replace it. The heating system could never be switched off even on the summer. All of these were reported and promised to be fixed. Over time the patio door hinge, which was snapped, completely fell off and we couldn't close it properly or lock it. Reported and were told it would be fixed, waited months, and even though I was still paying full rent it never got fixed. I eventually got fed up and reported it to the local environmental health team. They came out to inspect the property and raised concerns over the kitchen floor, which was warped and a major trip hazard. We also discovered from this visit the 4th bedroom, which was in the loft, was illegal due to how it had been done. No insulation, no heating, bodged electrics. So the local environmental health team handed an order over to the landlord to repair all these in a 3-month period. It didn't get done. The council took the landlord to court for breach and she ended up having to pay fines and was given another 6 weeks to rectify. A few of the jobs got sorted when I found my new house to move into. 2 years later, I've just found out through a close friend the council proceeded to complete the jobs themselves and the landlord has now been declared bankrupt due to this. Her house is being put up for auction. She will receive nowhere near what she needs to pay off her debts and has had to give up her other houses due to bankruptcy laws, meaning she can't own equity, not even a decent car. If only she'd put the rent I was paying into fixing her house, it wouldn't have gone this far. I'm not sure what's happened regarding the illegal goings-on, the gas and electrical problems that were never properly upkeep, but I like to hope she got punished in some way or form. Next one is titled, Boss Screwed Me, Revenge Rerouted My Life. I used to work as an apprentice electrician. I was about 2 months away from being eligible to test for my electrician's license when I blew out my knee while on the job. I was unable to work and needed surgery, so I applied for workers' comp. A little bit of background, I was a recreation marijuana user, however I live in Colorado where it's legal. I never used before or during work, and my boss knew about it. He had told me that as long as I gave him one clean urine sample I could continue to use. Also, I can't take opioid painkillers without severe side effects, so I prefer to use THC for pain management. After I blew out my knee, I abstained from smoking until I took a drug test and passed. I then confirmed with my boss that I had done what I needed to and I could smoke again. I began using marijuana for pain relief, as at this point I was still waiting for the surgery I needed. Shortly thereafter, my boss surprised me with another drug test, which I failed, as he knew I would. He then fired me. So now I'm jobless. I still have a bum knee which needs surgery, and workers' comp is refusing to pay for it, all because I trusted my boss. After 4 months of fighting with the insurance company, I paid for the surgery myself. As I recovered, I continued to fight with insurance and eventually wound up with a cash settlement, enough to live on for at least 6 months. Finally, it's time for revenge. I spent the time that I was on crutches researching and studying small business ownership, contractor licensing, and building laws. As soon as I could walk again, I was starting my own handyman business. I've built this business into a very successful business, with employees, and a widespread, and very wealthy, client base. 2 years after my boss made the mistake of lying to me, I regularly steal small jobs out from under him, and I am often able to convince my clients to hire his competitor for the jobs that I am unable to do. While I'm not running him into the ground, I know that I've taken a non-trivial amount of business from him. Next one is titled, The Youngest Brother Was Sick and Tired of Taking Orders from Someone He No Longer Recognized as Family. Okay, I have 2 older brothers. Eldest is a good person. The middle is a monster. He is a meth-addled felon. He has tortured my family for 20 years and I have taken the brunt of the assault as the only person willing to openly challenge him. He stole my mother's wedding rings, my grandmother's car, and my TV, to name a few things. My family has decided to try again to welcome him back into their lives, so I followed suit. It's Christmas 2013, the best holiday celebrations I could never imagine. All is well. Middle brother walks in the door to collect presents 2 days after celebrations. Strike 1. The middle brother drops bag of drugs when he walks in the door. Strike 2. Middle brother criticizes the eldest brother's renovations and tells my grandmother she wasted her money. Strike 3. In the car on the way home, decide it is best to go back into town together so it saves someone a trip. Middle brother asks me for my passport. I say, no, I can't do that. Middle brother concocts magical story where I have borrowed his ID to get into clubs when I was a teenager. Lies. I did not and would not. He says he needs it to get into a party. He's 300 pounds and 35 and would never be carded under any circumstances. Middle brother differs to his standard method of persuasion and starts yelling and is getting increasingly loud and argumentative. I tell him that it is illegal and that it would be very bad for him if he gets caught. There's a line somewhere between asking and demanding something of someone. He crosses it. My heart races like it used to when I was a boy. When he used to follow my friends and I and beat the crap out of us with his friends. I remember him pulling me out of a lake where I almost drowned. But it's not him anymore. The brother I knew is gone and there's a total stranger directly behind me demanding the symbol of my liberty. Strike ducking 4. I tell him that if he mentions my passport again on the ride home, I will crane the steering wheel into a snowbank and beat him within an inch of his life. I hear, "Give me your passport," in the voice of a man I don't know, from a face I don't recognize. Blood and adrenaline surge from my heart faster and more rapidly than I have ever felt. We pull into a parking lot, I open my door and wait patiently until that butt works up the courage to fight me. He steps out and yells something I don't hear. I tell him that I'll give him one more chance to get back in the car without saying a word about my passport ever again. He says passport with a wily grin and expects me to be the same cowering boy that I used to be. The same kid who loved him and adored him and wanted nothing else but to be just like him. I connect the quickest and hardest fist I've ever thrown against another person directly onto his chin. Blood spurts out of his mouth with the second blow. He hits me twice above and below my right eye. I completely lose my crap and wail on the left side of his face until it is a broken and bloody ruin. If you're reading this, middle brother, duck you. Next one is titled, "Trashy Tenants Moved Out of Parents' Property in the Middle of the Night." Few months later I got them on social media. Tenants on the trashy side had been living at parents' property for a while. After a cash windfall, they decided it was time to move out. Fine. Whatever. They start complaining and being late on rent, mold, etc., and take us to court. They never show up to court. This elongates the process so they end up basically living for free in our house while taking us to court for poor living conditions, I know, right? A few months go by until they have to go to court. One of them shows up crying that their baby is dying because of the mold blah blah. Judge goes in on her saying, "You've been living there rent-free for over 6 months, if your baby is sick why don't you leave?" And we also had a mold guy come in and inspect the house and he basically said it's not mold that's giving your kid breathing problems, it's your cigarette smoke. Case gets thrown out, they gotta pay back rent. Literally that night they get a U-Haul and leave town. I followed their every move on IG knowing they were eventually gonna slip up. A few weeks go by and they start posting pics of their house and such. Eventually they put a location on one of their pics. Bad move, honey. Bless your heart. Got on Google Earth, found street, found actual house by matching the red door to one of their pics. Sent it to lawyer. Motherduckers got served and the guy had to sell his vintage car to pay us back. Next one is titled, "They Made Sure Justice Was Served Not Only for Them, but for the Entire Town." A crummy repair shop in Moab, UT messed up our car which left us stranded in a nearby national park. We called and demanded they tow the vehicle in, and while they said they'd come get us they never did. When we talked with park rangers they were quite familiar with the shop, the biggest in town, and with a terrible reputation. We were on our honeymoon, and had more time on our hands than I imagine most travelers do. We went to the shop, demanded a full refund, and when they refused we sat out front on the curb in our camp chairs for 2 days with homemade protest signs. I was overwhelmed with the support we got from locals, who honked and waved, stopped and chatted with us and shared their own stories of horror. The owner called the cops on us, but the joke was on him. We'd already notified the police we'd be protesting, and were well within our rights in doing so. In the end the shop owner refunded all our money and left visibly distressed when we told him that even with the refund, we weren't sure we were ready to leave town. Eventually, we did, but not before filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau and every review site we could find. They'd already been booted from the Chamber of Commerce. We ended up becoming friends with an awesome local mechanic and having a great story to tell. Justice was served, and without a tinge of guilt. Next one is titled, "Think You Can Pick on Me Because You're Old? Think again." A few weeks ago, I was just casually browsing my local grocery store's fine selection of steak, when an old lady caned her way up to the counter. "What the bleep is this?" she shouts, pointing at some salmon. It looks like fish, ma'am," I casually state. She then picks up the package, pokes a hole in it and sniffs it. "Bleep. This crap is spoiled," the lady screams. She drops the now ripped open raw salmon onto my sandals and canes away. Well, now I'm standing here dumbfounded as to what just happened, and my foot is covered in raw fish. The manager walks up and asks what happened. I explained the situation, and he apologizes, gives me a towel and sends me on my way. I grab some bratwursts and make my way to check out. Guess who's there? The old lady. She was berating the cashier for not being able to count her cans of cat food properly and was leaning on the counter. She had this hybrid cane thing with 3 legs on the bottom, so it was self-standing. I gently kicked the cane with my foot as she reached for it. The hag fell to the ground and cursed like a sailor. Nobody saw me do it. I even helped her up as she hit me, calling me a darn dirty racial slur, even though I'm not even what she called me. I felt bad when I got to my car. She could have broken a hip. Next one is titled, Eat All My Food While I Fix Your Phone. Have fun explaining this one. I used to work for the largest company in the world by market cap and know quite a bit about their electronic gadgets. This has earned me the unfortunate family title as tech support for all things fruit related. Last week, I received a call from my brother asking if I could fix his friend's phone as it was acting weirdly. I told him to come by my place and I would get it sorted out. Well, this friend of my brother's is 16, and kind of a little douche LD. He also smokes far too much weed to ever be healthy. Nothing against the stuff, but seriously, too much is too much. Anyways, they come by stoned out of their mind right as I finish making myself some delicious baked spaghetti for dinner. I proceed to update his phone to the new OS and fix his issues, which was an app that required an update to the latest OS version to work properly, and all is ready to go. I come back to find my baked spaghetti completely devoured by LD while my brother was playing video games in the living room. You motherducker. So I went into the settings and now his phone autocorrects tired to hi every time he types it in. That way, every time he types I am too tired, it becomes I am too high, etc. Give him the phone back and say all is fixed. 2 days later I get a text message asking what the hell, because his friend is grounded for telling his parents he was too high to go to a family dinner. Never eat my goddamn spaghetti. Next one is titled, She Picked the Wrong Guy to Mess With. They had someone go around and check if the dogs are leashed, if not they call animal control to have them taken away, yet HOA has called animal control on people who have their dogs leashed. Their reason? The length of the leash was either too long or too short. They tried to take away one guy's dogs for that reason, and that sparked a war between the HOA head and the homeowner, who was a former Marine, a former police officer, and all-around madman. HOA head did not stand a chance against a retired, crazy person who had a lot of time and money and was well liked in the neighborhood. What he did was completely not normal to the mostly conservative community, so they started calling him crazy and it kinda stuck. Crazy guy built a pool and let everyone used it for free, making the $20 per month pool the HOA set up useless. Crazy guy also held a giant all-inclusive party that had menus for everyone's dietary needs. Any police officer that came to check on it left with to-go bags. They hated the head too. He also had a Halloween party, as the HOA did not allow trick-or-treating. The head was ousted from the HOA after she tried to break into Crazy Guy's house. She was the trophy wife of this big shot doctor and her father owned most of the land in the neighborhood. She was losing support and I don't think she was thinking at all, just desperation and anger running her in her system when she did it. The new head mellowed out some of the rules, but after this debacle, they realized that they didn't have much in the way of authority compared to before. The crazy guy never ran for HOA, but he did start a restaurant, sponsor a drag competition, and possibly took up karate. Next one is titled, He Was Going to Show Them. The antenna was 15 feet taller as my dad had raised the extension in response. The HOA president put a fine in our mailbox immediately and gave my dad a stern talking to at our front door. The following day, the antenna was raised up another 10 feet with an extension added in. At that point, it was clearly visible all over the neighborhood. Another fine showed up in our mailbox and my dad had to go to another meeting. They threatened to begin eviction proceedings if he didn't take it down immediately. He acquiesced and agreed to take it down. The next day the antenna was still there with my dad on the roof first thing in the morning, waving at the HOA president as he predictably came around to inspect. In a furious huff, he went to the council and called my dad in and told him that they would begin eviction proceedings since he was not only violating HOA rules but making a mockery of them. At that point, my dad pulled his ace card and had my uncle lawyer come in and explain that where we lived, HOAs could not regulate the use and transmission of ham radios and licensed operators due to their use for emergency communications and transmissions. My dad knew this all along but just decided to mess with the HOA regardless. He kept his tower and the HOA caved in on the fines and punishments and realized they couldn't do anything unless they wanted to take us to court and prove that what my dad had was unreasonable, which it clearly wasn't. It's his favorite story to tell at parties. Last one is titled, "This HOA quickly learned why they should help their residents." I went away for a long weekend and left after work on Thursday. Late Friday afternoon, my water heater burst in the attic of a 3-story home and flooded my entire townhouse. When my neighbor got home from work, he saw gallons of water running from underneath my garage door. When he realized I wasn't home, he tried to find my phone number, and when he couldn't, he called the HOA to notify me. The lady that answered said that since it was after business hours, it was 5:01 at this point, the matter would have to wait until Monday. My wonderful neighbor ended up calling the non-emergency police line and they came and shut my water off from the street. When I got home Sunday morning, my entire house was damaged and I could see my attic from my basement. After a massive panic attack and a frantic call to my insurance company, we started the process of repairs. The cherry on top was that I needed to have a dumpster placed in my driveway and a moving pod to remove what was left of my furniture while they began drying out the house, and I got a visit from the HOA. They didn't like how unsightly my home had become and wanted these items removed from my driveway. I essentially told them that they could take their complaints and shove them. I got a little revenge too because I stopped paying their stupid fee since they couldn't find me before 6 months and I was moving in less than 5 months. I'll never own another home with an HOA ever again. Thanks for listening.